What's up, everybody, and welcome to the No BS Real Estate Show, a podcast that gives you an inside look on how to make smart financial decisions while adding value to your life. I'm Matty Miller with ERA Real Estate, alongside my co-host and real estate investor extraordinaire, Ryan Robbins. Whether you're a longtime investor or a first-time buyer, join us as we dig through the everyday bullshit of real estate. Mr. Ryan Robbins, we are live on the No BS Real Estate Show.
We're live and a little blurry.
We're alive and a little blurry. I got a new little trick for the, I'm not sure if it matters much, but either way, we're live, ready to go. And we got a great topic today, talking a little bit about home inspections. What do you know about home inspections?
Been on a few. I've got one tomorrow.
Okay,
Aside
good.
from that, I've got nothing. I have absolutely nothing, Matt.
I have seen a lot of different types of home inspections, and we'll go down the list of things to look at, things to not pay attention to, and we've hit home inspections on a thin note, but we've never really done a deep dive on home inspections and what you should be looking for, and kind of the intricacies of finding a home inspector, what to look at, what the home inspector is going to tell you and what he's not going to tell you. That's the other side of it. So a lot of people think the home inspector is going to tell you whether you should buy the house or not, and that's just simply not true. Basically, we'll start with point number one here. So you have the right as the buyer to choose the home inspector. A lot of people don't really know that. They typically, and what ends up happening typically is the agent they choose typically refers them a home inspector, and that's kind of who they end up going with, which is fine most of the time. But if you have someone that you know and trust that is a licensed home inspector, that's the key, is licensed home inspector, because I've literally had a situation where my buyers said, oh, we got a home inspector we want to use, and the guy's was not licensed at all to do a home inspection. But that was good enough for them. They paid him $100. He came out, he looked at it. He had a construction background, apparently. So I asked them, I said, guys, you realize that I need a report to give to the sellers, that's by a licensed home inspector. And if it's not by a licensed home inspector, they can just kind of throw it out. They don't have to, do anything. Now you can always back out of the deal, but you're not going to get very far when you're asking for repairs without a licensed home inspector. So the National Association of Home Inspectors, which is NHI, so NAHI, or NAHI, or however you want to say that, is actually a training program that they can go through to get licensed to become a home inspector. So it's a written exam, it's a whole class, and they have standards of practice and code of ethics as well. So they do have that information, readily available, and what they're supposed to abide by as far as being a home inspector. So
now, this is going to come once a buyer's under contract. They're going to have an inspection period, which is negotiated generally somewhere between 10 and 15 days, I would say is standard. To your point, it's going to be easy to argue or negotiate further with a seller if you've got a licensed inspector. But during those 10 or 15 days, you can do inspections. They don't have to be licensed or insured, but it's going to be very hard to argue a point of, hey, this doesn't look correct, but I'm just making that opinion on my own, as opposed to having somebody that is licensed to observe.
Correct. That. Yeah. So the main point you want to use a licensed home inspector, obviously, is just the kind of the bargaining power that you're going to have with the seller. So if you have a non-licensed guy come in there and say, hey, well, that AC looks old and da-da-da-da-da, and, he just writes it up on a Google Doc and sends it over, chances of your seller taking that home inspection pretty seriously, or just, calling it straight BS, not to have a play on words there, but calling it BS and saying, this is ridiculous, I'm not doing this, get out of here, let's go find a new buyer and go from there. That's pretty likely what'll happen. So you want to make sure you do have somebody that's licensed, and they can, like I said, it can be somebody, we don't, as a real estate agent, we don't make any money off of a home inspector or anything like that. We don't, it is what it is. So the home inspector I use, I don't think has referred me one piece of business over the years. So it's not like I'm tied to one person or another. If there's a home inspector out there in Jacksonville that would love to refer some business our way.
Keep us in mind.
Ryan and I are definitely open to negotiations. So, we use a lot of different home inspectors. I use a pretty local guy. Well, when I say a local guy, it's just him. I don't use a big company. I prefer to keep it small. He gives me a pretty good opinion and doesn't try to, screw the deals, so to speak, which we'll get to that point. And that's actually the very next point. So, home inspections are intended to point out adverse conditions, not cosmetic flaws, which is something that people go in, they say, well, they're not going to comment on things like paint. They're not going to comment on, it's basically to uncover faults. So they're going to look at, roofing. They're going to look at structural things that are going to, really affect the integrity of the home. They're not going to comment on things that don't impair the integrity of the home. That's bottom line there. So, they're going to look at ACs, appliances, all sorts of things throughout roofing. Obviously, we already covered. They're going to look at plumbing systems. They're going to look at electrical boards. They're going to make sure that, the wiring's all good to go. It doesn't have aluminum wiring, which is a big thing down here in pre-1960s homes. If they haven't been wired in years, they could have aluminum wiring, which is combustible, people. So not good. So yeah, just in case someone comes back and says you have aluminum, you're allowed to have, and I don't know, this may be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. You're allowed to have aluminum connections inside the box.
Is what they're called.
Yeah, alumicons. Yeah, so that's why I said I didn't know the name for them, but you're allowed to have aluminum connections into the box, but you don't want your actual wiring to be aluminum. So the wiring that runs from the box all the way to your light fixture above your living room, you don't want that to be aluminum wiring, but they can have an aluminum connection into the box. Partly because that's, from what I understand, it's concealed inside of the box. So they're not going to have any type of issues there. So typically.
Other thing to keep in mind while we're on, they're pointing out adverse conditions, not cosmetic flaws. Well, at the end of the day, they are simply licensed to inspect. They are not a licensed electrician, a licensed roofer. They're not licensed in each individual field. So they may be able to point out that, hey, there's an electrical issue, but they don't necessarily tell you what is wrong. So they can determine something may not look correct or be acting correct. But again, they're going to still then refer you to, all right, go speak to a licensed electrician.
Correct.
Go speak to a licensed roofer.
Who's going to give you a further explanation on why it's wrong, what's wrong with it. Was it installed not up to code? And that's the thing, is some of these things, not every house is perfect. So one thing we always run into, well, that's not up to code. Well, when they built the house or the last time they sold the house, that was up to code. It may no longer be up to code, so it needs to be updated. And that's something that the buyer or the seller should obviously handle on their end. Hey, if it's not up to code, ask them to update it to code. And typically those things are small, depending on what they are. So yeah, the main thing that the home inspector is really going to point out, they're going to look at just kind of a list of things. They're going to look at, and some things that I missed when I said it earlier. So they're going to look at the exterior. They're going to look at the siding. They're going to make sure that all that stuff's on point and there's no leaking or major wood rot. They're going to look at steps, porches, decks, chimneys. Chimneys are a big one. Older homes, you have a chimney. They're going to look at the chimney. You're going to look at the chimney cap along with the roof as well. They're going to look at windows and doors, make sure that everything's working the way it should properly. They will look at attics, plumbing, heating, electric, basement crawl spaces, garage doors is a big one too. We always get like the garage door. Well, your safety mechanism isn't working right, or it's put in the wrong place. We get that one wrong. Like, well, it costs like $25 to move it. So, put it in the right space. But yeah, things they don't do is tell you if you should buy the home. Not a thing. They should not comment on, I wouldn't buy this home. They shouldn't. They should be third party. Even though you're technically paying the fee. So you're as the buyer, he's working for you. They're just going to give you a really good idea on what's needing to be taken care of on the property, or what could be another key component of this is what could be a safety issue in the future. So if not repaired at some point in the future, it could be a safety issue going forward or down the road. That's kind of a key thing. So yeah, it might be an issue. It may not be an issue, but at some point you're probably going to need to get it handled. So just keep that in mind when you put the offer in and accept it and you move forward in the process.
Yeah. No.
So termite inspection, another one, by the way, missed that one.
Which some do and some do not do. Some home inspectors do not do WDOs or wood destroying organism, as what that would refer to.
Correct. So they won't do a WDO for you. Most of them won't. But they will say, hey, there looks like there's some termite damage here. You need to get a WDO. And most lenders in the state of Florida, depending on what state you're located in, they're going to require you to have a WDO anyway. So like I said, depending on where you're located at in the country, you might have a little bit of a different process for that. So, and most importantly, when they do write it up, they're going to come out, they're going to spend probably, I'd say the average home inspection is probably about 2 hours, maybe three, two to 3 hours, somewhere in there. They're going to, really go through things with a fine tooth comb and just make sure there's not anything major that's a huge issue. And they're going to give you a written report. And it should be a written report based on the standards of the NAHI. I don't know how you say it, NAHI or NAHI, whatever. National Association of Home Inspectors. They have standards that they need to be written up by, and they're gonna let you know what is needing to be done to the property, if anything. So
I think you kind of covered. No, I was gonna say I think you kind of covered point number 3 there, which again, home inspection reports include only the basics. So again, they're going to touch on pretty much every item within the house. They're not going to dive into incredible detail about every item. So they're going to point out again, hey, your siding has issues, or hey, your roof needs to be addressed, but they're not going to tell you each little intricacy that's wrong with the roof and or how to go about replacing that. They're just going to, again, point out the issue involved in each process or, portion of the house.
And at that point, it becomes a negotiation point. So as you're going through the process, hey, all right, here's my report from the inspector. I want to negotiate based on this inspection. Well, when you do that, you're often going to send it to the seller side. They're going to look at it and say, okay, well, this home inspector, he did a good job. I've had home inspectors come back and they'll just kill deals. They'll point out every single tiny little thing that literally doesn't doesn't really matter, whether it's you're missing a plate cover over a plug, right? And that comes back, and then all of a sudden what they do sometimes is you'll see a number on the very front of the thing that says, we noted 168 things wrong with this property, essentially. And as soon as a buyer sees that number, they go, oh my gosh, there's so many things wrong. In the grand scheme of things, there might be about 4 things that need to be addressed. Maybe if that, maybe 5 or 6. And it just scares them so much to where it's like, no, you need to write a very nonpartisan, hey, this is going to be a situation at some point. This is a very easy fix. Or this is, hey, when they built this home, this is how it was done. So you need to be prepared for that. So things like that. So
I think that comes down to buyer education as well. I think that's something us as agents need to do a better job with. Potentially even home inspectors need to do a better job with, educating the buyer to let them know that, hey, look, there's going to be, 100 issues with this property, and not all of them are major issues. Some of them can be a $1 fix at your local Home Depot. But
exactly.
Because again, to your point, a buyer's going to see, hey, there's 100 issues, and they just see it as there's 100 issues, not, hey.
Yeah, they see it as, oh, this house seems like a big problem, or it seems like it's going to be a money pit, or there's many issues, behind these walls, or man, if that's what the home inspector can see, what happens when we get behind these walls and what actually happens. So yeah, there's a lot of issues there. Don't take it, let your agent look over it. Your agent should know, hey, what is an issue? What's not an issue? Where can we, negotiate a little bit on said issue, and you can move forward. And hopefully the seller is willing to go through that. So as far as go through and listen to what you're trying to request, I guess would be the better situation. So, and you have 10 days, obviously, to get the inspection done and prepare a report in Florida. Our 10 days is our low end. You can negotiate it out to 15 if you want to. I'd normally just stick with the 10 because I can just call my guy. But if he says, hey, I can't, then I need to, extend that inspection date. So that's typically not a huge issue. So,
and then you've got 7 days after that point to negotiate terms back and forth.
Correct. Yeah. So
once you submit it.
Sorry, I said 10 days.
No, and you said total. It correct. So you have 10 days to submit the repair request and do your inspections, and then once you submit it,
correct. You have 7 after that.
You and that seller have 7 days thereafter to then negotiate
yes.
it.
Sorry, I left out a key phrase. So my apologies to our many listeners throughout the country.
Yeah. All right. Number 4, home inspectors work for the party who is paying the fee.
Yep. So we kind of covered that earlier. It is, it says, the home inspector should, remain client confidentiality. So he doesn't need to be reporting back to the seller for some reason. And if the seller, I've literally had a situation where the seller contacted the home inspector and was upset about the inspection. And I said, please do not do that. They looked them up online. And they were just livid because they did kind of kill the deal, to be fair. So my seller really did kind of had a complaint, to be honest with you. And it was one of those where they literally pointed out everything and said, this house has 225 issues with it. And that buyer just went, nope, I'm out. And they just, didn't even look at it. And a lot of this stuff was just piddly stuff. It was just he did a lot of work on the home himself. And it was good quality work. Let me be honest. He had a construction background, so he knew what he was doing. And these home inspectors just can't even kill the deal completely. So that deal fell apart because of that. So, but at the same time, the buyer was paying the fee. They're working for the buyer. And then he had a conversation with the home inspector himself, kind of killing the deal on both sides. So that was a pretty poor situation, but
this can work, can work for the buyer at the same time. So again, since the home inspector, you're paying for that, you also don't need to disclose. It's kind of like an appraisal. You pay for the appraisal. If it comes back over what, you're buying the property for, you don't need to tell the seller that. And same thing, maybe the seller says, hey, you know what? I think my roof is old, I'm going to give you a discount. So we're going to, take a little bit off on negotiation, assuming the roof, and the inspector may come back and say, look, you've got 5 or 10 years left in that thing. You're not going to then show them that report that says, hey, actually the roof is good, or hey, these other items are good, because now it again plays against you in that sense. So again, you paying for that, whether it's an appraisal, whether it's the inspection, can work in your favor as the buyer as well, not needing to disclose anything. So
for sure. And lastly, I'm going to be a short podcast, going to kind of keep these to about 20, 25 minutes here going forward. Inspectors are not responsible for the condition of the home. And what that means is that if you purchase a home and then 4 years later, you rip out a wall and you discover something that wasn't in the report, you can't necessarily go back after that inspector and have him pay for the damage. And you're probably not going to be entitled to anything because inspectors don't go behind walls. They only inspect what's technically visible to the eye. And if they obviously see an issue, they're going to say, hey, you might want to have that looked at. But if there's something that's covered up, or this is where it gets into the seller trying to deceive the buyer of something that was probably done on a property that was not to code, or they hid something, as a major issue that they tried to hide on purpose, then you're going to have a lawsuit on that side. But you can't necessarily go back after the home inspector because, like, again, he worked for you. You hired him technically. You're not going to be able to go back after that person unless it was something that was visible that somehow he just looked over. But again, if a situation is a very expensive issue that was behind the surface, so to speak, you're not going to be able to go back after them. So
this ties right into they're only there to point out adverse conditions. So
yes.
Again, they're going to tell you that there may be an issue with the outlet, but they're going to recommend a licensed electrician tell you exactly what's wrong or exactly what needs to be done, because they're not going to tie their name to anything.
Correct. Yeah, and they shouldn't. So, and they're going to, like I said, they want to get a licensed inspector in that particular field to go out and look at it. So, and the reason why the home inspection is advantageous to the buyer is, imagine in this situation, if you were buying a home and you had to go send out a licensed electrician, a licensed HVAC guy, a licensed plumber, a licensed roofer, a licensed, you're going to have 7 different kinds of people in your house. Well, I got news for you. None of these people are coming out for less than $100. So there's $700 down the drain, where a home inspection is going to cost you about $300 to $400, depending on the size of the home. If it's really big, you might be up in the $500 to $600 range. But that being said, that's going to cover a lot of those issues. And if you indeed have to take somebody out, like an HVAC person or an electrician, then you're going to contact those and take that step just one further, or take that one step further to figure out what's going on in the property. So it is advantageous to use a home inspector as opposed to calling 7 different people. And the other side of that is, do you really know 7 different people that you trust to come in and look at those things? And you might. Some people do. I mean, I do, because I know a bunch of contractors and vendors. But I also don't want to take the time to set up 7 different inspections for 7 different people to come out and look at my property to make sure that it's ready to go.
So I think that's probably wraps up this. So I'm gonna throw a little curveball and play devil's advocate here.
Here we go.
I'm going to look at a report, and everything I'm looking at says, all right, hey, there's this issue, but we recommend a licensed electrician, a plumber, a roofer, whatever, take a look at it further because we're just simply alerting you that there may be an issue. I'm going to now say, okay, I just paid you $400, and now I just have a report that I could have gone through and said, hey, I've got a broken outlet, or hey, this, hey, that. Have you ever run across I'm sure you've run across a seller that gets irritated. Have you ever run across a buyer who's said, well, hey, they pointed this out, but now we still don't know the issue. What's that going to cost? And what do we do about it then? Because sometimes I've had one in the past that basically said, why did I pay for an inspection? They just pointed out things I could have essentially seen, because aside from you climbing up into the attic and, some of the other stuff, or if you just have zero clue about construction, if you're a little bit more handy, maybe you've bought and sold a couple of houses in your day, you may look at it and say, I think an inspection is a waste of money.
Yeah, well, and to be perfectly honest with you, if you're a person that, and I'll get to answering your question here and say, if you're a person with a construction background or something like that, you may very well be able to walk into a home and see a lot of those things, because most home inspectors, they probably had a construction background of some sort. They may have been a licensed electrician or a roofer or something like that. They have some kind of trades background typically. And they just end up doing home inspections, whether it be some people do it on the side, some people do it full time. So there's both situations, but a lot of them do have a pretty vast knowledge of, whether they were working for a builder at one point, like the gentleman that I use, he owned his own construction company and was building single family residential homes. And then we kind of got out of that business and, got a little older and said, I'm not going to, go swing the hammer for 18 hours a day. He said, I'm going to do some home inspections and do some minor repair work on the side. So that's what he does. So the other side of that is typically, I feel like it's one or the other. So does that person look at it and go, why did I pay for an inspection? You're either going to have somebody who knows nothing about it, nothing about a home at all, and they don't even really know what a home inspection is supposed to do. Or you have somebody who, again, like you said, if you're a buyer and you're a construction background, and you're okay with not paying for a home inspection, but the problem is it comes back to the negotiating part. You want to have something on paper from a licensed, so you're kind of stuck, I guess. It's almost a monopoly, if you will.
Yeah.
Because in order to go to the seller, you're going to want to have something on paper by a licensed professional. If you don't have that, whether you owned your own home inspection company years ago, you're not licensed anymore. So you can't type up the inspection and send that over to the buyer or the sellers. So yeah, again,
now, I would say unless it's necessarily, if it's obvious things, because at the end of the day, home inspectors are going to point out the obvious too. If you walk into a house and you see a cabinet door is falling off they're going to note that as well. So there's certain things that may be obvious, but that also, I guess, comes down a little bit to the negotiation side where technically anything you can see with the naked eye is assumed to be negotiated into that initial contract price.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is if you were to get a report back and everything on the report was, hey, I'm buying this house, we know we're going to have to rehab it. And everything that they noted on this report was something that I already noticed when I walked through the house the first time. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. I would say so.
So, and really what you're doing is you're just really covering your, dotting your I's, covering your T's to make sure that, dotting your I's, covering your T's, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, to make sure that there's nothing major that's not visible to the naked eye, that he's going to get up in the roof, he's going to look at the AC, he's going to test, and just make sure that everything else is cool. Cause we're not walking on roofs ourselves. Even if I was going to, I'm not going to get up there, but, I have before, to be fair, but, that being said, yeah, you really just want to cover your butt and make sure that there's not something that they're missing. But again, in a home inspection could very well come back and everything can be very simply, easily found on the home inspection that's available to the naked eye. So in that case, I guess my question is, are you going to gamble on spending $300 on a home inspection and missing something completely by not doing it? Or are you just going to pay the $300 in the chance that they're going to catch something that might save you thousands of dollars down the road? I'm probably going to pay that $300. So you kind of look at it like insurance a little bit.
Yep.
So it's ensuring that your property is in decent shape. There's obviously every property is going to have stuff that's going to come back. So it's never going to be, hey, this house is perfect. It's never, and you can't even do that. You can send a home inspection through. You can send a home inspector through a new construction house, and he still would have the same. He'd still have.
I was going to say they do, and they do go through new construction, and they do find things. So,
and they do find things. So
that's their job.
There's this common misconception that with new construction properties that everything's going to be perfect, and that's just simply not the case. Because at the end of the day, human error is still part of it. You have to, I mean, you're still having, some guy who you don't even know, even if you're building a home, if you're building a home through a builder, you don't know the person swinging the hammer, doing everything. You have no clue. You don't know who the electricians are. They're all hired out. So you're not, those people can make mistakes too. And we're all human. So we make mistakes. I make mistakes, almost every week. Hell, probably every day. So, but the difference between that is, admitting that you made a mistake and making sure you go get it right the next time, or work your butt off to get it right for the client. So, because everybody does make mistakes. So, except Ryan Robbins, of course, never make mistakes. Yeah, that's false.
Far and few between.
Yeah, exactly right. So, anyway,
that's that. We should cover that one of these. We are no BS. One of these days, we're going to talk about mistakes of real estate. I was talking to investor today, and again, hey, nobody ever talks about the horror stories. Well, yeah, it's, to me, I say it's like the lottery. Again, no one talks about the times they lose. They only talking about the times they're winning. So
yeah,
one of these days, we're going to cover the mistakes we've made.
You go to the casino, and no one ever talks about the time that they went in and got worked by the casino and lost $1,000 the time they sat down. But they are going to talk about that time when they hit the jackpot, which, by the way, that's one out of the 100 times that they've been. So if you think that person goes to the casino and hits a jackpot every time, you're probably wrong. So
they're going to make you think that, though.
Exactly, they're going to make you think that exactly. So. Other than that, man, I'm glad we got to catch up. It's still been a pretty busy February so far. Busy January. I think this is episode number 3 of the year for us, so we need to keep getting back on that train. I think it's number 3 for the month, to be honest with you. I think the first one we did, they were all in February, I think. But I don't think we did January.
Or very end of January, one or the other, yeah.
So. Anyway, you got anything else to add? What's the rest of your week look like? Any big deals?
We got a closing this Friday. It's one that's been in the works since actually the end of 2018. So right before the holidays came together. So glad to see this one coming to an end. And the buyer's excited too. Actually, this is a second property for them. Nice little vacation spot on the beach here. So
very cool. Very cool. I just picked up. Looks like this month we'll add 3 new property management clients, which is nice. So we'll add 3 of those. We added 2 back in January, so we're on our pace to. We're trying to grow at least 2 per month.
Keep that side of the business growing.
And if I can find one, I need one investor with about 15, 20, 30 properties to really get to that next level, and we can hire another guy. So that's kind of the goal here at some point. So. If anybody's out there listening, know that you're an investor and you need a quality property management company to handle your stuff, give me a call. 904-574-1958. 904rents.com is where you can find me. And you can email me at matty@mattysells.com. And mattysells.com is obviously the sales website. So, Ryan, where can they find you?
Jack's Property Pros. So I added up an available properties section. Those are ones that I physically have listed up on the MLS. I'm also throwing up a few off-market properties. So again, just started to push a little bit more onto the site here. So if you guys are checking it out, also have an inside sales guy, consider him a transactions and or acquisitions manager. So we're doing a lot more off-market prospecting. So if there's any investors out there that are looking to add to their portfolio and not finding anything on the market, give me a call, shoot me a text, an email. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if there's anything we can do to, again, help you guys, add to exactly what you're looking for there. So 904-382-0573. And again, the website was jaxpropertypros.com, and that's JAX.
And we obviously both do buying and selling for the general public as well.
Yes.
We are very well versed in the buying and selling of things, but we do work with a lot of investors and help those people as well. So if you're out there and you need some help, give us a shout. So
Cool.
all right, man. Well, I appreciate you joining us, and we'll leave it to the outro. All right. I'll see you, man.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a few things I'd like you to do. Subscribe, leave a review, and head over to nobsrealestatepodcast.com where you can connect with Matt and I on all of the platforms we're on. Also, if you could do us a favor, leave a message letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode and what you'd like to hear about going forward.